Hey all, here OS Reviews. Today we're taking a quick look at the Meechen M30. This is an MP3 player or DAP, digital audio player, that sells for around 70 bucks, claims to be hi-fi grade with a slightly higher quality DAC, digital to audio converter, than you'll find on lower cost budget players as well as on most smartphones. So if you are an audio enthusiast, you want higher quality sound, playing back lossless formats like FLAC, that's where a dedicated player like this can still shine. So more specifically, the DAC here is the WM8965 and TPA6530. So it looks like they're using a dual core kind of architecture there, which is interesting. Has this very retro mechanical vibe with the scroll dial, supporting different types of external outputs, and claiming up to 30 hours of continuous listening time before it needs to be recharged, along with supports a micro SD card slot to expand the memory up to 256 gigabytes. Now it is worth noting that it's not the first time that we've checked out a player from these folks. They do specialize in MP3 players, such as last year we saw a version that has a touchscreen that might be just a little bit more conventional in terms of similar to modern day phones, but again, this is really for folks that want something that is even more mechanical in terms of all the controls and keys, but functionality is also a little bit more stripped back in the sense that it has a higher quality DAC, so the sound quality should be better, supporting again high-res, hi-fi audio, but you aren't able to use it for, let's say, watching videos or photos. But then again, not that you would really need to or want to anyways, considering our phones can already handle those tasks with larger displays. So here's the box. It's pretty clean. Inside, of course, we have just the M30 itself we'll be taking a closer look at, and other accessories that you get include a quick user guide. There are no headphones included, as expected, because you would probably want to pair these with higher quality headphones anyways if you're the type of person to pick up a hi-fi player. And also you get just a charging cable and data sync, which is using micro USB. So that is one thing which I do wish they would upgrade to Type-C, but it is what it is. Now last but not least, you will find a bundled free 64 gigabyte micro SD card also in the box, but again, you can also pop in your own. So taking a closer look at the design of this M30, it is really compact, I have to say, but does give me some of the iPod vibes. The build quality of the player is quite good because it's made predominantly out of this piece of aluminum, definitely more dense than you would think looking at the size alone. Modern day smartphone that has a 6-inch display, you get the idea there. This thing will really easily fit into pockets. Now some other branding info on the side there, and then on the right-hand spine is where we have access to the USB port, micro SD card slot. There is a dedicated volume rocker, which is pretty tactile and really great to see. It's just like on phones. This makes it easy to control volume even if you have the player in your pocket. The top here features just the power key to lock and turn off the display. Finally, we have just the audio connectors there at the bottom. Now, taking a look at the front, aside from the display, you'll also find access to skip track controls. You can use this to scrub between parts of the song, which works quite well. All the controls here are pretty tactile and clicky, also made out of metal. There's a simple menu key to offer additional context settings, as well as a back key. The play key here basically also enters into the menu of what you are selecting, so you can press there to go inside. Now, last but not least, we have the jog dial here, which, as you can see there, may not always be functional when you are inside the music interface, but if you return all the way to the home screen, you do have the ability to also use this to navigate the UI, which is in this carousel view that kind of echoes what that dial will look like. But what's interesting here is you can also use the skip track controls to pretty much do the same thing, which is pretty versatile, but it also makes this more of a decorative piece in my opinion, because I do personally find it to be a little more responsive just to use these buttons to navigate one item at a time, unless you want to scroll really quickly through a longer list. The overall scroll dial here feels pretty responsive in terms of the action and has a satisfying noise when you're spinning it. However, the placement is a little bit funky. You can kind of use your thumb to control it, which is fine, but it is a little bit closer to the bottom of the device, so you have to kind of shift the position to more comfortably hit it. That bottom portion also has this interesting cutout which can act as a lanyard if you need it. Now, returning here to the main display at 2 inches, it's decent enough for looking at content, although it is a TN panel, so it's not quite as good as an IPS. Not the biggest deal since you're not really looking at videos or photos on here anyways, but if you really start to tilt the screen, that becomes a bit more apparent. So you can see how colors can definitely seem a little bit more wonky at extreme angles. But overall, it does the trick. Very simple UI here, actually playing back music, which you have the ability to sort by artists, genres, and also albums. That works perfectly fine. And in terms of additional settings, we have the ability to change things like the language, brightness of the display, set up a timer so that the screen will turn off after X minutes, and see if there's any updates. But again, there is no Bluetooth or Wi-Fi on this particular model. That is one thing that, again, perhaps I wish the device would possibly add Bluetooth. Nowadays, a lot of folks will often use wireless headphones anyways, even though that kind of destroys the purpose of a high-res player, since lossless audio, unless you are using something like LDAC, will always be inferior to a wired connection when it comes to latency, as well as the detail that you're preserving. But still, just for the added functionality, say when you want to use wireless headphones, I think they should at least consider that, because a lot of the other models that we've been seeing recently on these MP3 players have adopted that as well. But regardless, you can also see your favorited music tracks, and it will show up as a separate folder on this device. There are some equalizer controls that you can also trigger, so there's quite a few different modes here, from rock, pop, soft, jazz, classical, and a custom one that you can change the frequency spectrum yourself, and does make a pretty significant difference. Now, one thing I have noticed here though is similar to the Z8 Pro music player that we did a review on a little while back, is it sometimes struggles a bit with cover art info. So supposedly this should be the region that shows the cover art, which works perfectly fine on some of the other players, such as on the X Duo models that we've reviewed in the past, and even variants from companies like Bassplay, which are all competitors in the same space. But I have found that this model is a little bit more picky when it comes to cover art showing up, so that's just a side note. But still, the music itself, of course, just plays back perfectly fine. You can also tap on the menu key to add it to a playlist. So what this will do is, again, allow you to either favorite this track or put it into one of your custom playlists for more easily accessing, which is pretty handy, especially if you have a lot of songs that you are looking at, considering versus a phone where you have a QWERTY keyboard to search up something specifically, it may be harder to do on something like this, which you have to rely on the scroll wheel to get through. Moving into audio quality and performance, I have to say this is something that really does shine on this player. First of all, it's extremely smooth. So everything in terms of connections are done very well. You can play and pause the track. Everything just gently fades away into the background and then resumes again. Very quick and responsive. Nothing pops and makes any noise in the background. And the actual sound itself is rich and filled with detail, especially when you're listening to FLAC, lossless audio tracks. So much nuances that are beautifully reproduced on this device, coupled with solid sounding headphones, that is. And no issues in terms of volume. In fact, in my usage, I found that pretty much at 5 or 6 level, it was already very loud and satisfying, so I can only imagine when you crank it up all the way to almost 90 or 100, it will be roaring and blasting. And also low distortion, that is perhaps the most important thing. So when you are listening to the music, you don't really hear any hints of static, there is no hissing, and I have to say that it sounds better, at least in my test, compared to the aforementioned Z8 Pro that we did a review on just a while back. And I think I like the controls on this thing more as well. The fact that it uses these mechanical keys I personally prefer compared to touch controls. So I think it is done really quite well. Perhaps the only competitors would be models from X Duo, which are now also coming down in price. Although again, if Bluetooth is not a functionality that you necessarily need, you're sure that you're just going to be listening to this with wired, high-res quality headphones, then this thing is even more compact, and the sound quality, I would say, is perhaps even a little bit better. So you can check out more details in the links down below. I would say this is kind of like a better sounding iPod in a way, but again, doesn't really give you any extra features outside of that, but can still be worthwhile, again, if you are kind of a hi-fi or an audio enthusiast. You can check out more details if interested. For now, that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. That's been the Mi Chen M30.